How's that? Is that okay? Well, thank you so much. I mean, thanks, Carl, for the invitation to come here today. I'm going to share one project with you called the Magic Money Tree. I'm going to see the book for the first time a week today, and I'm installing the exhibition in Bristol from tomorrow. So I'm very much in this work. It's 3 years of work for me, so I'm kind of bursting to show it to you and tell you about it. So I was lucky enough to get an Arts Council England National Lottery Project grant, which gave me funding to travel around England last year and document the cost of living crisis. And so this is one of the areas that I worked in. This is a place called Tipton in the Black Country, with the Magic Money Tree looking very bare. And the title for this work comes from this quote from Theresa May, and she was replying to a nurse on BBC Question Time in 2017 who challenged her about her stagnant wages. But what the phrase, the magic money tree, also refers to is the lie that we're told that it's not enough money. There's not enough money for a safety net, for a welfare state, for the NHS. So I chose to concentrate my energy in 3 places because I wanted to work in places where I could really get to know people over the space of a year. So I live in Bristol, so I chose South Bristol. I chose Tipton in the Black Country and South Shields in the northeast. This is a picture I made in Tipton, and my preferred way of working is to get to know people over a long period of time, go to their house and photograph them at home. But I also want to be able to take photographs on the street. And I really like this picture because for me there's a lot of tension in it. And when you make photographs on the street, a really interesting thing happens. So if you're a photographer, you might perceive that you have a right to photograph anybody on the street. But most of the time, it's negotiated, and it's quite often done through body language. So if someone's walking towards you, it's really obvious if they don't want their photograph taken. And I don't want to take anybody's picture if they don't want the picture taken. And what the general public has is a lot of people have a sense of their own privacy. So when you're working on the street, these 2 things collide, which I think makes for a very interesting space to take photographs. And in this instance, this woman is looking directly at me, and I feel like it's full of tension. And she's just checking me out, thinking, what are you doing? Why are you taking my picture? But at the same time, she's not objecting to it. And one of the most difficult things about the project was to start from scratch in a community that I wasn't part of. And so before the project started, I tried to come up with a strategy, and I tried to partner with photography organisations in the areas that I wanted to work with, in the hope that they might introduce me to the community that they knew, and they might introduce me to people that I could work with and photograph. And that just didn't happen. And so I was kind of starting from scratch. So I was going to Tipton, not knowing anybody, not having any contacts, not knowing anything about the place, and trying to find people that I could work with over a long period of time, that I could get to know, I could go and visit in their house. And so James is the kind of person that you hope to meet. So James was the first person I met in Tipton, and I met James because I read about him in a local paper, and then I tracked him down on Facebook and we met in the local chip shop. And James was my anchor to Tipton. So when you're starting to work in a community, you need a way in, and James was that for me. And that first time I met him in the chip shop, and we met in the chip shop because there's nowhere else to sit down in the whole of Tipton. There is a pub, but I didn't fancy that. But James is also a brilliant storyteller, so I found a few people that were great storytellers. And James just painted a picture of Tipton as a place that was very important in the Industrial Revolution, and since the industrialisation, it had just been forgotten about. And he told me that it's quite traditional in Tipton for people to have large families, but with that, there's lots of families that are really struggling, and there's layers and layers of difficulty for them. And I took this picture of James just beside his front door because James is known as in his community for helping people out. So people will come and knock on James's door. And when I met him, he was helping a family, a woman with 3 young children who hadn't had a cooker or a washing machine for 3 months. So James was right at the centre. This photograph comes from a commission that I did with Bristol Photo Festival and Historic England, and it was all about the High Street. But Bristol Photo Festival put me together with Food Bank in South Bristol. And I knew I was going to go into the food bank and not take photographs of people at the food bank. I wanted to do something that was more collaborative, and so what I did was the way the food bank was set up, you have tables and chairs, and a volunteer goes through the list of food, and after people have chosen what they want, there's a wait. So there's about 20 minutes, half an hour, while people are waiting to have their bags of shopping made up. And so that was the time that I had, and I would just go and talk to people and do informal interviews. And I did that for about a month. And then there were certain key phrases that I took, and then I wrote them on the high street, on the bus shelters, as a way of making pictures of what is kind of invisible. And I'm not saying that I think we should never see any photographs of people visiting a food bank, but this approach just seemed right at the moment that I was making the work. This is a picture that I made from something that somebody in Glasgow had said to me. So in December 2022, I sent a photo essay to The Guardian, and it was me warming up into the subject of the cost of living crisis. I was starting to take photographs and think about what I could photograph that would tell the story of the cost of living crisis. And I sent the essay off to The Guardian, and this piece of text was a caption in one of my final images, but it got edited out, and things are edited all the time, but I really felt that this was key to what I was trying to say, and I really felt that whoever edited it just didn't quite see the significance of what I was saying. So I decided that I would write it on the wall and I'd make it into a photograph, and in that way I felt that it would be perhaps more powerful but more difficult to ignore in a photograph. And this is Michelle. So after I visited the food bank, there was 3 women that I followed up with, and I offered them cameras. And Michelle didn't want a camera, but I went to her house and I made a portrait of Michelle. And Michelle said that she could see the cost of living crisis in her cupboards. She just couldn't afford to eat healthy. She likes food from the ground, she likes salad and vegetables, and the closest she could get to that was potatoes. And this is another photograph from the food bank series as well. And the kind of questions I was asking people in the food bank were, what's caused the cost of living crisis? And one of the questions that just kept coming up was, well, surely politicians know what it's really like. And many people said, yeah, they do know, but they just don't care. This picture is from South Shields. So in South Shields, my way into that community was I shadowed a social navigator who works for the council. So in that area, they have very well connected council services. So I followed Barbara, and her job was to identify individuals that were really struggling and really in need, and she would connect them with the services that the council had on offer. So Barbara took me to St Hilda's Church, and every Thursday morning they have a drop-in cafe at the church, and it's an incredible place. The first time I went there, my stomach really sort of flipped over with nerves, because there were so many people so visibly in need. But I kept going back. So the first time I went there, I didn't take any pictures. And I kept going back, and it was a place that brought people in. It was run by 3 really strong women who had to deal with a lot. So, sometimes in this environment, there's no alcohol allowed, but sometimes there'll be trouble. There'll be people smuggling in alcohol, people taking drugs in the toilet, but these 3 really strong women really kept a strong grip on the space, and they made hot lunches and were just so hospitable and caring, and were having a laugh with people. So this is a picture from St Hilda's, and this man had been rough sleeping, and when he came into the drop-in cafe, he had a cup of tea, and I just watched his head go down, and he fell asleep. And it's a really very sad picture, but when I show this picture, I try and show it in context. So I show it with this one, so you see the environment that, and the care and the mutual aid that surrounds this. And then there's the hot lunch and people getting together. So trying to keep some kind of context in my photographs is really important. And I think that there are some people that might think this picture is othering towards this man. And I think with this picture, I'm just satisfying my own kind of conscience, but it's a really difficult subject to photograph. The images that inspired me, I had to go back to the 70s and 80s to find examples of anybody who was recording and showing poverty. And there's still a real question in my mind, is it okay to show it? And I don't know. But as a documentary photographer, what I'm trying to get close to is a truth. And we all know that we can take a photograph of a person and we can show them looking great, we can show them looking ugly. And as a documentary photographer, you kind of want to get to that line. And I think it's important to have photographs that sit on the line. I would find it a problem if all my pictures were like this, and if all my pictures showed people who are struggling. But there's only a few, but I keep them in because I really want to reach that line. And at St Hilda's, I was taken into a side room and shown these paintings. And a man called Dave had made these paintings of his experience of being homeless and also his friend's experience of being homeless. And Dave was very happy for me to use them in this work. So as well as my photographs, there's paintings, other people's paintings, there's other people's drawings and other people's photographs. And this is Jacqueline. So on one of the days that I went into St Hilda's with my camera, I explained to people what I was doing, and there were so many people that wanted to tell their story about the cost of living crisis. I offered them an opportunity to talk to me and tell the story, and so many of them just absolutely grabbed it. And I'll read you a bit of what Jacqueline told me. During the COVID period, I had been homeless and had great difficulties. I couldn't get any help during that period to find anywhere else. I had to live in a tent. I've got a place to live now for the past 3 months. I'm just getting used to the cost of living because bills and everything like that, especially gas. All these things that you have to cope with once you do have a home and a roof above your head again. It's quite difficult. It costs a lot to live. So this is a warm space that I photographed in Gateshead as part of the Citizens Advice Bureau. And I photographed this in 2022. And I was just trying to think of what I could photograph that we can see. And part of the difficulty with this project is that a lot of what people are experiencing is completely invisible. And one of my roles in the work was to try and make visible the line that goes from Westminster and government policy, and it travels all the way into people's lives and into their experience. This picture was it's of Katie, and Katie's one of the mums that I know from my daughter's school, and it's of her reading her email from the DWP about the removal of the £20 uplift to universal credit. And I remember when that happened, and I couldn't quite believe that the government was taking money from the pockets of people who needed it the most, and I had to mark it with a photograph. This is Tipton Shopping Centre, and it's a photograph I took of Maria and her grandsons. And I took this picture, and then moments later I stopped Maria, and I had my audio recorder with me, and I did a short interview with Maria. And I kept in touch with Maria, and every time I'd go to Tipton, I'd go and visit Maria. And we sparked up a really lovely friendship. And one time I was at her house, she showed me these drawings that she did when she was a child, and she had kept them, and she showed them to me, and she hadn't done any drawing since she was a child. So when I sent her a letter, I sent her some charcoal pencils, and she started doing drawings, and she'd photograph them as she'd send them to me. And this drawing, in the drawing, it's Maria with her daughter Bernadette, and Maria lost her daughter Bernadette when Bernadette was only 50. But I think, Maria has done this thing that we do in art, and she's explored something that was really painful to her. So in the exhibition and in the book, Maria's drawings are featured in that as well. So in Tipton, James introduced me to Vicky, and Vicky runs a dance school. And in the holidays, Vicky puts on clubs for the local kids, and she's also able to access funds that mean that she can buy in breakfast for the kids as well. And she quite often has children coming in and having breakfast when they haven't eaten that day. And Vicky actually asked me to do a photography workshop, and so I jumped at that. And in the Easter holidays, I did a photography workshop for a bunch of children, and we started off by getting to know them and doing some drawing and just talking and listening to them. And then I gave them cameras. They had little plastic compact cameras with film in them, and we all kind of exploded out into the shopping centre. And I love the pictures that they made. So they're doing cartwheels, and here's another one. And they're so full of energy and so vibrant. And I hadn't expected this, but basically they played with the camera. And to have these kind of pictures alongside my photographs, which are much more serious, it was an absolute joy. And people have asked me, why so much of the work about children? And I think what I'm realising is, well, because I was one of those kids, I didn't grow up in poverty, but I did grow up on the breadline. And my friends round about me, they were definitely experiencing poverty. And I know the long-lasting effects of that. So I think of my childhood as growing up in an environment that was violent. And I'd say that violence started with the socioeconomic violence. And I still feel that in my body. So, I think perhaps that's one of the reasons I wanted to work with children. But there's so many policies that affect children. And when we talk about poverty, quite often it's the individual that gets blamed, and they're told they're just not working enough hours, they're feckless, they're lazy, they're not trying hard enough. But with children, that argument, it just doesn't exist because they're completely innocent, and there's so many policies that directly affect them. So in the exhibition and in the book, I kind of go into the two-child benefit cap and the lack of universal free school meals in England. So this is a portrait of Alex. I worked with another youth group in Bristol, and these children were a bit older. They were kind of 10 to 14. And so I photographed them, and I gave them cameras, and they photographed each other. Because they were a bit older, we had a bit more discussion about the cost of living crisis. And this is Dylan. So I gave Dylan a camera to take home, and he took his own photographs, and some of the other children took cameras home and photographed themselves and their bedrooms. And we had this workshop where we made placards. So I was really conscious with this work that I didn't want to portray anybody in a one-dimensional way. I didn't want people to just be photographed looking like a victim. So I was looking for alternative ways to make photographs. And I think that from thinking about that, I then looked towards activism and protest, because I guessed having agency and being active is the opposite of just being a victim. And part of my research, my visual research into poverty and the working class, I had looked back to the Great Depression, and I wanted to compare the Great Depression with the cost of living crisis. And during the Great Depression, I found these unbelievable images of people holding placards, and especially there was one man wearing a sandwich board, and he had written on it how many children he had and how many months he'd been unemployed. So I kind of took this language, and I did a workshop with the young people, and we started off with a discussion. We started off by talking, and I asked them questions, and I was asking for their point of view. And to start with, some of the children didn't answer. But as the discussion went on, they couldn't help but answer. And I thought that actually what they were doing is they were actually using their agency by not wanting to participate until they really wanted to. And because it wasn't school, because nobody was forcing them to join in, they joined in on their own accord. And I asked them to make a placard, but I was interested in them and what they cared about. So they could make a placard about anything. What was important to me was that they made something about an issue they really cared about. And that is working in quite a wide way. But I knew that I would get something out of it. I knew there would be a sliver that would align with the story that I was telling. This is Alandra and her mum Kath. So originally I really wanted to work with families over the space of a year, and it didn't quite work out like that. But I worked with Alandra for a whole year, and we would meet up at the city farm in Bristol and make photographs together. And this was a photograph that I took when Alandra was fixing her mum's hair, and I then helped Alandra using my medium format camera to take portraits of her mum. How are we doing for time, Carl? I've lost track. Okay, right. This is Holly, and this was taken in South Shields, and I loved working in South Shields. I really found that there was a real openness to people there. I don't know if it's because I'm Scottish and it just worked a bit better for me, but I found that in South Shields, people would come up to me and they would approach me and they'd say, "What are you doing? Do you want to take my picture?" And that just never happens anymore. But it happened in South Shields and it felt really, really special. And one evening, it was a Friday evening, I met Holly and her cousin Leroy, and they had, Leroy and Abby had they travelled down the coast from Whitchurch, which was like 10 miles away, with their horse and cart, and Holly had just bumped into them while she was out shopping at Greg's for her dog. And I said, "What did you buy? Was it a sausage roll?" She said, "No, it was a cream cake or something." But I didn't just want to photograph people struggling. It was also important to get those other pictures about just life in general. And I suppose this is one of those kind of tender moments. And so all the way through the work, I'm thinking about, well, how do I photograph people? Which side of the line am I going to go on? And can I actually show people that are really having a hard time? And this is just one of the more tender pictures. And this is back in St Hilda's church at the drop-in cafe. And the very last time I went to St Hilda's, I had kind of wrapped up the project nearly. I was at that stage at the end of 23 when I was already editing the work, but St Hilda's was having a Christmas party and I couldn't resist it, so I tagged in another visit up to South Shields to photograph their Christmas party. And this is Leanne, and Leanne is really special in this work. So Barbara, the social navigator, introduced me to Leanne because Leanne was working in the drop-in cafe. So I met Leanne quite early on, and Barbara said, "I think Leanne will be really good for your project." And I couldn't really figure out how Leanne was going to fit into the work. Leanne's got 5 children, and initially I thought, oh, I'll give her kids some cameras. But one of her children was adopted, and 2 of them are in care, and her older children, they weren't interested in the cameras, and they didn't want to be photographed either. I found quite a lot that people didn't really want me in their house. A lot of families didn't want me to photograph in their house. And a lot of people didn't want to be photographed. But Leanne and I kind of hit it off, and I asked if I could go to Leanne's house to take some pictures. So as I was photographing Leanne, it was one of the most amazing experiences actually, because it was like she was like an onion and all these layers were coming off. So she told me about her children, and she told me about 2 of them that are in care, and she told me that her son, she gave him up for adoption, and it's really painful. Leanne must live with a lot of pain, but she had just seen her children on a visit, and it was their birthday. 2 of them were twins, and she was so full of joy at spending that time with them. So it was a really special moment for me, for Leanne to just tell me her story like that, and it came out, as we were taking the photographs. And then at the end of the session, she shows me a photograph on her phone, and it's the last time she saw her son. And it's a picture that I'm not showing. I'm showing a different frame because it's too sensitive to show a picture of a young boy who has been adopted. So, Leanne's story was really amazing, to meet Leanne and for her to trust me with this story. And so I just kept going to visit Leanne, and sometimes I would just go in for a cup of tea. And then this was in December, and on this visit, Leanne told me that the reason that she gave her son up for adoption was because she'd just come out of a relationship. She didn't have anywhere to live and she didn't have any money. And so really slowly, Leanne became my collaborator. And in the work, these are Leanne's pictures that she took at Christmas. So last Christmas, she had her two eldest children were living back at home. And this is a photograph that I took in Bristol, and it's a woman giving her spare change to a homeless man in the street. And for a long time, I had thought, I will never photograph a homeless person in the street. Just because I think people in that position are way too vulnerable. But through making this work, I started to think, well, if I'm not picturing people that are actively homeless and rough sleeping, am I editing them out in some way? And I don't really have an answer for what's right and what's not right. Okay, thank you. So I don't know if you can tell, but this project made a big impression on me. And once I'd done the photographs, I didn't feel quite finished with it. And so I wrote 2 poems that are in the book, so I'm going to read you one of those. It's called The Cost of Not Caring. A tin of tuna for dinner, a bowl of cereal. 2 bowls get you through a day. An evening meal of toast, or nothing at all, for 3 days. She was sick that morning because she was so hungry. Children come first, mums go without. 1 tin of soup, over 2 days. Not teas, not coffees, not milk. Flatmates stole all her food, leaving her empty. Shampoo in washing machines. People don't go out. Isolated, ashamed, traumatised. The food bank opens on Thursdays. It's emergency food. Means tested. Kind volunteers pick up the pieces. The safety net now shattered. 14 years of this. Food banks followed the wake of welfare reforms. The switch to universal credit in the 6th richest country in the world. An unelected Prime Minister, a millionaire, 200 times over, stopping small boats without stopping small boats, whilst ignoring this. So this is one of the pictures taken by one of the kids in Tipton, and this picture was taken by her brother, and I absolutely love it because I know that he took a much better picture of Tanya than I ever could have. And it's been really important in making this work that I've been able to see what my strengths are and what other people's strengths are. And it's the first time I've worked collaboratively. So I've learned a lot about leaving space for people and recognising other people's strengths. And so this is the cover of the book, which I'll see next week. But I just want to finish off with sharing a little bit about what I've learned, making my way and trying to make work in the photography world and get it seen. And it's part of a small guide that I'm planning to make, and it's called Playing the Game. The Game is Rigged. So the first thing is the right fit. So what I've found is the way to make things happen is to find other people who are the right fit for you. I spent a lot of time feeling deflated when my work is just not the right fit for a gallery or a curator. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is support. So I spent a long time trying to get people to support my work, and the people that I thought would support my work didn't support my work. And in the end, I was able to recognise how much support I actually do have. And this work was made because of the support, indirect support, from people who bought lottery tickets. And so when I think of support like that, I can see how much support I've had for this project. And I think support is super important because it's not often that work is made in isolation and it manages to reach an audience on its own. And my last point is about nurturing and investing in yourself. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Did anyone have any questions for Kirsty? I just want to say thank you. That was really amazing example.
Thanks.
Yeah, if anyone's got any questions.
When you talked about support,
Yeah.
were you talking about financial support or support and encouragement?
Yeah, so some of it's financial support and some of it is just about finding those people that will also push your work out to an audience. So it might just be somebody sharing a social media post, but it's more about that feeling of support. And what I've noticed is that when other people kind of come on board with my work and when I feel supported, that's when I've been able to push the work and take more risks. And it all feeds into it. So it's all the support.
I have a question. You spoke about that kind of through the project you realised that, like a lot of people didn't necessarily want to be photographed in their house and stuff like that. How did you deal with that rejection? And then how did that change your kind of process and approach to the project?
Yeah, I just had to work with what I could get. I had a year to make the work, but that's not actually very much time. And so there was one family that I really wanted to work with, and they had 4 children, and they didn't want me to come to their house. So I thought, well, we'll do the workshop in the chippy. So we went through the cameras in the chip shop, and we went into the shopping centre and took some pictures. And those kids were going to take photographs on their summer holiday, and they weren't going on holiday with their parents, they were going with their nan. And I so wanted to work with those children, and I never got the cameras back. And I think many people's lives are too complicated and too stressful, and I'm asking a lot. So there was lots of things that fell through and didn't happen. But it was about making enough connections with people that I had other things to fall back on.
Kirsty, in terms of your own process, I was just going to ask actually how long the period of time that was that you were working. But yeah, in those different geographical areas, that is not much time at all. I'm not aware if you do all of your process on your own. So I was thinking about when you were talking about the image on the floor, the hat, the coins, and those dilemmas that you have yourself during a moment of shooting or making work. Like, are there people that you then call upon or speak with in those moments? And I guess I'm so interested in how on earth you would approach the book process.
So at the beginning, before I started taking photographs, I had a real panic, and I thought, okay, I need to speak to some other people, and that didn't happen. And there are people I could talk to, but I didn't. I think when I was in the work, I just thought, I'm just gonna do what I think. But now I've made the work, something that I really do want to have is I want to have a conversation and widen it out and ask other people how they think we should photograph poverty in particular, because I got to work with Save the Children and Shelter, and I can see that charities aren't picturing the people who are most affected either. So I think it's a conversation that we need to have collectively.
Yeah, and because you mentioned also needing to research or look back at references from the 70s and 80s to
Yeah.
how poverty was being represented and then shaped and formed. So that threw up loads of thoughts for me about how do we set up those discussions or
Yeah.
opportunities to look at that more. Okay, interesting. Thank you.
I just thought it was really beautiful work, really tender, and the humanity of it. And it is tricky, but I think going in, just being with people and listening to them, engaging with them, and you can't edit out certain realities, but you have to speak with those people and let them choose maybe how they want to be seen.
Yeah, I think a real key point is asking those people that are most affected, what do they think? Do they want their picture out there? Do they want to tell the story? Yeah.
You can't just
But what
pretend
happens,
it doesn't, people's lives aren't like that.
I think what happens in the charity sector is, I'm going to assume it's a middle class dominant space, and so people are making decisions on behalf of other people without really talking to them about it, and it's uncomfortable. But
It's great to get that last picture in the book that showed like a positive,
yeah,
and it, despite everything,
Yeah.
you still have some kind of joy, some
because that's the full story, isn't it? There's still joy and there's still happiness, and yeah.
Sorry, it really sits with me because I have adopted children. I
Uh-huh.
work very closely with, I still be in touch with the birth family. And
Yes.
from adoption, I actually worked in a place for deprived children youth club.
Uh-huh.
And they came and you engaged with them.
Yeah.
You have a photograph at the time. It's about engaging the dialogue. We made food together. So it's not judging, not saying, oh, you're poor, but we actually had fun together.
Yeah.
And we were just transparent to each other. So the project really sits with me.
Yeah.
I think it's a question about getting funding.
Yeah.
Because obviously Arts Council this year is definitely one doing political
Yeah.
or and this is very
Yeah.
political. So I was wondering how you went about that, because this is something that I want to explore more.
Yeah, I was really lucky in the year I got funding, because this year seems like they've had a change in policy, and I got quite worried and paranoid actually before I showed the work in Walsall, because it's very political, but the curator there is near retirement, so she didn't care, so we went for it. But yeah, it's right. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much again, and it really is everyone.
Maybe that will show in the work. So a little bit about me. So I think it's always good to say where you're from, your background. So I was a pub kid. This is my mum and my grandma here. And my auntie, who's not in the picture because she wasn't allowed to show the picture, so fair enough. But her picture was also about her being a barmaid behind a bar. So I was one of those pub kids that would sleep under coats, under like a sea of smoke, often being woken up by the Irish national anthem at the end of the night. I was a solo daydreamer as a kid. I was an inspiring Irish dancer and a reluctant churchgoer. I grew up around people who had forgotten their mother tongue, beautiful women with lacquered hair, addicts and exhausted workers, and people who struggled to know their worth, not on any fault of their own. People with a brilliant humour who could transform the council estate into a temporary theatre. So that was a bit of, where I come from. I belong to a diaspora, a fragmented community of Irish immigrants in the working class, benefit dependent sometimes, working poor, sometimes criminal, sometimes underclass. And I've experienced all of those things above at some point in life, and now I'm an artist. Yeah, it's a bit of I don't know how to wrap my head around that sometimes. Again, this presentation focuses on my artistic process, some of my joys and some of my frustrations. Photography as collaboration is really central to my practice. And again, using that word, interconnectedness, I'm using photography to understand, and art to understand myself and others in this, maddening, crazy world. I also use it to challenge the status quo, and I would say, my collaborative journey started at 19 when I first picked up a camera, and I started to photograph my mum and my grandma from that first experience. So they were my first collaborators, and here they are. And you'll see how that collaboration has gone through the next couple of slides. So, I always felt like an artist, but I didn't realise that it was possible to be one. My background in photography was a bit hazy, messy. So I don't really have that story about getting a camera from a grandparent at a young age. I kind of left school with no qualifications and went straight into work as a cleaner, and I worked in a greasy spoon for a really long time. Really hate greasy spoons because of that. I can't step in them today. But off by chance, I was walking the dog at the local college, and which was really positioned right next to the council estate that I was living on, and it was the council estate was quite next to a green patch. It was really, really nice actually. There's lots of trees and green. Quite lucky in that sense. And I stumbled across a film studies teacher who was having a fag outside on an open day, and got chatting to her, and she took a chance on me and signed me up. I don't know if I had a really, really deep interest in film at the time. It was one of my things I used to love when I wasn't working, is to analyse films, but just no study, just to do it. I don't know if the course was undersubscribed or the fact that she saw something in me, but that was a chance and I jumped on it. And then I kind of went in an entry-level course to film, and one day a week photography was part of that, and I fell in love instantly and started to photograph my family very subconsciously, and now quite consciously. Over the past 20 years, I've been shooting, collecting and archiving family photos. There weren't many pictures of me, or there wasn't pictures taken when I was growing up. There was no cameras around. Most people were working. So I think that's also why I became a bit obsessed about gathering pictures of my family without any context or articulation on it. It was a real kind of drive force. So my work mostly focuses on women in my family, because my grandma was the matriarch. The women were very present. They were the caregivers in the environment. I feel like going back, it started very subconsciously, but now it's turned into this kind of all-consuming, meaningful work to me. So I'm going to talk to you through this project. It's called No Rest for the Wicked. And I guess the title is, it starts within the Bible. It's a proverb. And it means kind of evildoers will face eternal punishment. Yeah, that's my Catholic learning coming through. but yeah, this kind of, it's fascinating because it can be extended to the modern day of like, you know, a sinner's work will never cease to exist. So that made me think of the question, so to be poor and working class, why is that such a sin? And who's rendered us there? So a lot of this work now, I can articulate the work that I've been making over these past 20 years. I can contextualise it, and I can articulate it and position it, and I can understand why maybe I was making that work in the first place. But I guess it kind of looks at, well, it doesn't kind of, it does look at this cycle of labour endured by the women in my family, and I imagine others, and looking at working class women across 3 generations. So really looking at my grandmother, my mother and me, and my auntie and my cousins do come into it sometimes, but at the moment it's not what I'm showing. So yeah, it's a series that examines how work, paid and unpaid, and being poor can transform the human spirit and body over time. And this is just a series of pictures, probably one of the first rolls, a film that I took actually of my mum cleaning she got home from being a cleaner and a barmaid. She used to barmaid at night, clean in the day, and then kind of find these moments where she could, when she could, to clean the house. And yeah, here it is. It's in a repetition because it's supposed to portray the repetition of labour and work inside and outside the home. So I totally forgot about this role of film until I went to study an MA in documentary photography in 2016. And I started to kind of get a grip on my vast amount of negs and start to scan them in. So I think this was probably taken in 2004, 5, and so this in 2016, 17, that's when I started to kind of develop the project, and this kind of grew. This project grew out of a frustration really that I was studying a documentary photography course, and I was trying to find work that talked about class and gender and women, and I couldn't really find anything that articulated, or more so that I resonated with. So I kind of got myself together and thought, I've got pictures, so maybe there's something in that I can learn from. So I kind of looked inward, started at myself to find narratives that could talk about class and gender and these cultural and social issues in the UK. So yeah, apart from Jo Spence's work, who I know, Kirsty, is also an auntie to you. I think she's a guide to you in some ways. I found Jo Spence's work there, and she became someone really pivotal in kind of changing my perspective of what photography can do and how it can start to talk about these really deep, complex social issues of identity and so on. So I think these were taken in around between 2014 to 15, and I tried so I was finding a lot of that, the photography that I was coming across, documentary photography that really focused its lens on the lives of the working class in Britain. I was finding a lot of it, but not very much from a photographer from being a working class or from a position of a woman. So I wanted to start documenting my own world and trying to bring that narrative and that lived experience through. So the work became quite intimate and it became very reflective, and it tried to just capture what was happening in real time. If I couldn't capture it in real time, then I would collaborate with my mum and my grandma to reconstruct the scenes. Here's my mum finding a bit of downtime, she's dyeing her hair, and this was in the kitchen with a towel wrapped round her, and I think I was the one that dyed her hair for her. So it was this really intimate connection between me and my mum, and this space when she's not at work or not at work outside the home or inside the home. And these are really crucial moments of care and mother and daughter intimacy. This is my grandma's door with her dressing gown over, and you can see Our Mary, the icons, so kind of bringing in those, so having these conversations with the spaces that I was living in and growing in. So I would live between my mum's house, which was at the top of the estate, and my grandma's house was at the bottom, and I would move between these spaces depending what was going on at home and how chaotic it was at my mum's house, etc. So these spaces were really important to me, and I wanted to bring that through. I wanted to capture them forever. You know, there wasn't a family album for me, so I guess I was creating my own. So I think it goes beyond documentation, and I try with the work to question this nature of work and labour on working class poor bodies, but try and kind of take it out of time and space to try and make it transcend out of that, like a specific location or an era. This is my grandma's back. So I use a lot of metaphor in the work, and I really, my grandma used to make me scratch her back. So again, this really intimate moment, but then seeing this bra strap, which is such a symbolism of, you know, her womanhood, but it's, you know, it's old, it's tatty, it's been washed many, many times. It's like hanging on by a thread almost, and that for me was a really beautiful metaphor to really articulate what was going on in our realities. Smoking is a big part of our culture and lives as well, I guess. So like these moments of, even though it's toxic for you and it's really bad, but people just, fuck, it's a rest, do you know what I mean? So that's what that moment consists of there. So I was thinking about Kirsty and all the families that wouldn't let you in the home, and I think this is why we were really ashamed to let people in our house, because we didn't have enough money to decorate it, and a lot, you know, there's a lot, you know, it's a paradox, because my mum would go into other people's houses cleaning, but be too exhausted to clean and, you know, maintain her own. This was, you know, the council definitely didn't decorate your house for you. So I think this hallway was like this for like 10 years or so, and it was a real kind of stress about respectability, I guess. And I remember going down into B&Q, and remember when they used to do the, what would you call them? They're like, they would present how a kitchen could look, or how, you know, sets, yeah. And me and my friends would go down there and pretend it's our house, yeah. It's like these fantasy spaces. And, you know, the reality is you come back and it's not your reality. So there's all these like reminders of these spaces. It's a reminder of value, basically. So why couldn't we have these beautiful spaces? Why are there in these shops that we can't afford? So, you know, growing up, it brings up a lot of things around worth, basically. Who is, you know, and value, and who has access to what. So I was trying to always kind of push against the photography that I was seeing in a lot of the library, books in the library that I was studying at, so I was really kind of reserved into showing like faces and keeping my mum's and grandma's privacy within the work. So there was a real tension there for me, which has really loosened up over the past couple of years. So working in the spaces, there was a real interconnectedness to the space that I inhabited. So how do we collaborate with the non-human world, like the space that we live in, and what can these spaces tell us? How do we treat them, and what can we learn from them when we're making images? So I'm always thinking about that. So here we have like a mountainscape, a landscape of a bed of linen with a lake of shining silver, which are, spare money, collected 20p's on the bed. This picture holds hope for me because it's a bit of a tradition that my family just collects small change to hopefully accumulate it to then treat someone with and let them buy something to make them feel worth and value. So this image is a real beautiful image for me. This was one of the last pictures I took of my grandma, and here's my mum's arm. It was meant to be a portrait for me, but Nana wanted to come into it and have her picture taken with her sig. So that's one of the last pictures that we all worked together on and took as three generations of women. I don't really have much to say on that apart from it really shows her strong character in there, I think, and her demand to be seen through the way I was making work. And this is our rug on the line hanging, drying out. My dear friend once said to me, when you look at a photograph, especially when someone is in that photograph, pay attention to how they've been photographed and how they've been portrayed. And it really struck a chord with me, and it's stuck with me over the past 5 years. And it made me think about how often we see images. When we see images, whether in art or media, we fail to capture. It sometimes can fail to capture full humanity of a person. And I think we forget that people are more than just what we see in front of us. They're more than their circumstances, their environment, or their social political situations. And I think this idea, for me, deeply connects to this picture which I made with my mum in my grandma's house behind the curtain, about bread and roses, which is a political slogan, and it did start in America, but then it became quite prominent here in the textile strike the Lawrence textile strike in 1912. And basically what bread and roses represents is, the necessities of life, food, shelter and survival, while the roses represents beauty, dignity and nourishment for the soul. And we all deserve that, no matter who we are. And it's a call for balance. And I think that really connects with me in the way I want to make photography and represent and see people. It needs to be a balance. And people deserve to be fully seen. So I do get frustrated with ways of, working class and poor people have been portrayed. And I think, people are, like Kirsty, are working, new ways of doing that. And it's so good that things are changing. But I think about my mum here holding the mask up to her face. This is a mask of herself. And it says so much to me about passing as well, or simulating, in the way we are forced to kind of convince the world that we're poor working class women, to convince the world that we're more than a label or a stereotype, not just that we're just good enough as we are. We contort ourselves, we hide our true selves. So this is what those photographs mean to me, and I hope it makes some kind of sense to you. Yeah. So I get bored in my practice quite easily, quickly, and then I get stuck. I'm in a bit of a sticky period at the moment, which doesn't, it drives me a little bit crazy. So it often means I have to just go underground a bit and try and recalibrate and work out where I'm at and what I want to do. My friend gifted me this couple of years back, and they gifted me a letterpressing workshop to kind of loosen me up. And so so for me that's a real collaboration as well, her seeing that I'm struggling and then trying to move me into the right direction, to take risks and to fail. So what I would do is use letterpress then to work on the images that I am from 2004 and 2005, and to kind of recontextualize them. And text became an important element through this process, and it did loosen me up. It allowed me to play on the images, like using the word repetition, and kind of working with quite lo-fi materials as well, so it's quite free. So freeing myself up when I become stuck is really important to me anyway. So text became crucial, and I was trying to kind of take the everyday inspiration, so looking around, slow looking and seeing what materials in the environment. This is my mum's flat, council flat now, and trying to work out what materials, what objects can speak to me, what can I have a conversation with, how can they have these kind of silent oral histories with me. And so I kind of wanted to, the uniform, the tabard became something that I became a bit obsessed with. So I began to use these idioms, these sayings, no rest for the wicked, and change the company name on the tabard to words that I was working with. And this is one of the outcomes for that. This is going to be made into a huge banner, actually. I'm collaborating with a banner maker at the moment. So yeah, that's how I started to kind of loosen up these frustrations and these kind of sticking, the stuck feeling of not knowing where to go next with the work. So my mum, being a real collaborator with me, I invited her to come down to do a residency with me. And what we did, we played Motown, because that's the music we used to listen to when I was growing up. And we started to map our work histories. So we tried to understand ourselves through the labour that we had done, and whether there's a crossover, whether we've climbed the social ladder yet, that kind of thing. But my grandma had died by this point, but we still wanted to have her in the collaboration. We still wanted to have her present in the work. So we mapped Nana's, Mum's and mine work history, starting from 1930 to 2022, where we did the residency. And it expressed the myth of meritocracy, really, and how hard it actually is to be socially mobile when you're poor, and to get out of the situation. And working hard just doesn't cut it, because evidently, there's 3 generations there, and this could actually go back back into Ireland, to my grandmother and my great grandmother working in English houses. So my mum, we came up with this idea of trying to represent the work in a universal way by, she wanted to show the work as a statue, and this is my mum here as well. She wanted to show the work as a statue, but kind of have the metaphors of working hard, so the bricks on the feet, and how that makes your feet so tired at the end of the day. This faceless worker, this machine, within capitalism, not really getting any benefits. I had a dream, and after this, and I'll read it to you. I wrote about it the next day on the train going to work, and it's called Shape Shift, Work Shift, and it's about intergenerational labour. So last night, as I lay dreaming, I dreamt of the Irish Centre in Derby, a place that would become my second home as a child. The Irish Centre was a pub and cultural heritage space for immigrants, including the first, second and third generations. I belong to the third. In my dream, I saw the layout of the centre vividly, the floor plan and its sprawling bar, its beer-soaked burgundy carpet, the stage and the dance floor, the fruit machines right next to the entrance. During this dream, I was working, collecting glasses, wiping tables, sweeping up broken glass from neglected and fallen pint and half pint glasses, a sign that good crack was being had. As I worked tirelessly, I felt a sense of being watched by the crowd, forcing me to smile. I carried out repetitive work, walking laps of the room, bending and contorting my body to squeeze through the punters collecting their empty glasses. With grace and gratefulness, of course, lucky to have a job. On each of my rounds, on the tables filled back up with empty glasses, a metaphor lending itself to describing the reality that the work would never really end. Although, to be fair, they did drink quickly, those Irish lot. The twist in this flashback fantasy was uncovered. I was possessing my mother's body and her work role in this dream. This was the job I was performing, her job. Through this subconscious work shift, I felt her labour and her boredom, her not wanting to be there, her fatigue, her shyness, and her caution around the intoxicated and unpredictable male drinkers in the room. Just smile. Then flawlessly, the people began to transform, and plates with half-eaten food began to appear on the tables. Those staring Irish intoxicated men started to shapeshift into a different type of drinker. Now to those who used to occupy the Wetherspoons pub where I worked for over 10 years, where I would wait on and barmaid for, inherited work skills, mother to daughter, unskilled worker. Remember to smile. These men are a different type of public house inhabitant, present from open doors till kick-out time. Thankfully, they were less rowdy and more concerned about their drinking schedule. A different type of difficult. There was a feeling of ease that somewhere in my dream I seamlessly shifted into myself again, working, collecting glasses, squeezing by, doing repetitive rounds of the floor and the tables, feeling that it will never end, intergenerational work shift, time machine labourer. I wake up tired. So then I began to make this piece of work here called Magic Memories. And this is where the work gets a bit lighter for me. It kind of explores the intersection of family work and self-representation through family photographs. And it's based on photographs. These are the only photographs in my family album showing my mum and my grandmother. And we're all engaged in different work forms of labour. So there's a kind of blurred boundary in this work because it captures the moments where private life of my family and public life in work overlap, showing how the personal life is deeply tied to wage work. So the intent here is to kind of have a play on these like family cheerful memories. If we can see, we're all smiling, we're all respectable women at work, but we're all really exhausted. And it kind of connects to that CV, that intergenerational CV that I did. So for me, it was kind of capturing these photographic sleeves as well. So it kind of really talks back to the family album, self-representation. And these photographic sleeves, are kind of they're in line with the era that the pictures were made of. So it kind of transformed these family snapshots into this, for me, a commentary on how work shapes our identity, our family stories, and how we understand our own history. So, also I would invite you to think about how work has shown up through your family album as well, if it has at all. So the work's gone full circle, it appears, almost. Recently we opened the show was opened at the collection called Hard Graft at the Welcome Collection, and No Rest for the Wicked is part of that show, and my mum and me were collaborating with the Welcome throughout. It's really beautiful and radical and thought out exhibition, so I do not just come in it but just go and see what's there because it's really important politically. Here is my mum making the audio piece for the work, and she's in the Welcome recording studio, and it really made me laugh because she made me scribble out capitalism there at the end of because she was like, I don't want to be I don't want to be seen as too political, but if you read the rest of it, it's very political, so it's like she's contrary. But it was really amazing because in that space I was stuttering, I had to do my script about 6 times, and and then she gets in and does her bit in one run, and it was just incredible. It was so, she knows her shit, she's the expert here, and for me that was just a beautiful moment for her to also witness me at work, because a lot of this work that I do is witnessing her at work, and here we are. We were so tired after the opening, but yeah, and that's some of the install shots from the event. I was holding on to this wood chip wallpaper for about 4 years, and I'm like, what am I going to do with it? What am I going to do with it? And it's been shown in there. And I'll just tell you a little story about that interconnectedness and collaboration. So when I got to the Welcome on the install day, they hadn't. There was a miss in communication, and they hadn't fully pasted the wall fully with the wallpaper. It was just a panel, and then around was just grey. And I get in there and I'm just like, oh my god, I don't like it, but I can't tell anyone. Who am I to be in this huge institution and say, no, it needs to come down. It needs to start again. It's just not right. And it wasn't right. So I went to the toilet very flustered, and I don't know if you've been there, but it's very open toilets there, and I was about to get a drink of water from the tap, and this guy said, no, don't drink water from there, love. And I was like, okay. And I looked up, and it was a cleaner at the Welcome. And anyway, he just started, he didn't know what I was there for, he had no idea that I was presenting this work on cleaning, but he just started to tell me about how his life, how being a cleaner there, and how that is for him, his situated knowledge in that, what his experiences are, how people treat him, how it makes him feel, and how people see him lower than, often he's seen as invisible, and if he is seen at all, it's often not very nice. So that for me was an interconnected moment of collaboration. It was a spontaneous moment that I've learnt from, and it also empowered me to go back in the room and say, take it all down, this needs to be put back up properly for people like him. So he empowered me there, and that was really nice. There's this show in the exhibition, No Rest for the Wicked, is also in the Hayward Gallery, touring at the moment. It's up in Nottingham, which is my old turf, which is really nice. And they invited me to come and do some workshops around cleaning work and photography. And So I went and started these workshops. We had lots of cleaning materials out, and the idea was that many people who wanted to talk about the theme of how cleaning affects them would join, and we would look at testimony and art and around lived experience and history, and yeah, we could generate some stories together with some photos. So it was really interesting to see how cleaning could be really fun rather than this heavy work that I've been creating over the personal narrative stuff that I've done. And it was really beautiful to see and hear intergenerational stories of women and how cleaning has affected them inside the home and outside the home. And thinking about unpaid labour, one of the women, this woman here was one of the original protesters. She was a protester at Greenham Common, and she was also an original activist for wages for housework. And she just came in, and she just sat and listened, and then began to wrap herself up in foil. And she looked at me and she went, "Scrubber." And I was like, "I'm sorry, speak for yourself." And she's like, "No, we're scrubbers." And there was something so beautiful in that. This very British word, this derogatory word, for women. And she's like, "We're scrubbers, and we need to reclaim it." And I was like, "Can I use that? Can I make something from that?" And there was she agreed. So my next piece is going to be about scrubbers. I didn't expect to talk so much on the rest of the Wicked. I've got loads more to show, but we've come up to the 40 minutes, 5 minutes. So interconnectedness and invisibility. So Beryl, when we were all doing our lovely workshop on cleaning and our experiences around that, I met a cleaner again in the toilet. And she was a cleaner cleaning the institution, the gallery. And Beryl couldn't join the workshop because she was at work. But what she did was that she pretended to clean around the workshop. Well, she was cleaning because she was cleaning at work. And she was cleaning around the workshop, but she couldn't be involved in the workshop. And what was really poignant to me was that none of the other participants saw her, but she was actually there doing the work that we're playing with and experimenting on, and she remained invisible. And for me, that was really a moment of realisation in my research, and it's a real it's expansion for me in that interconnected, spontaneous moment. She dropped this little post-it note to me and said, "Could you call me? I'd like to work together." And my whole PhD now is about the representation of working class women within work. The representation of working class women through a study of cleaning work, and that's where my work's going now. So this 20-year project, which started very subconscious, not knowing what I was doing, this kind of this tool that really liberated me to begin to think and understand myself and how I position myself in this world, and how I understand class and how I understand gender and privilege. It's kind of gone full circle to this PhD research. So yeah, I think we'll stop there. Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much. Did anyone have questions?
Really interested in, you were saying that when you were younger, you really decided on film.
Yeah.
And it seems to affect into your work, or to me anyway, especially things like, with the one with the flowers and the
Yeah.
What is that a thing?
What do you mean?
Well, they're quite cinematic.
Yeah, when I started with film,
No, I was going to
yeah.
say, what sort of films? Or
I was into a lot of social realism.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of what was I into back then? One of my favourite films was Shirley Valentine, and it still is, you know. It's kind of playing with the everyday, and I always think about Bill Withers. You know, the way he can talk about everyday people, and the way he writes his songs so beautiful and so situated in the everyday, but they become these magical, visceral, emotional stories that we can all connect with. And I actually learnt that he used to be, before he was a songwriter, he used to fit toilets. And he came into his his career in his late 30s. So for me, it's like a lot of social realism, and a lot of music. Yeah.
But it's interesting though, it's quite sort of a bit of magic realism creating.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought that was actually that was kind of.
Which ones?
Well, like the hand and these as well. The hand but it's quite surreal as well.
Well,
So
yeah.
Surrealism in that way.
I was a bit obsessed with the surrealists, yeah. So yeah, it's amazing now that your point bringing that back up, because I forgot about that actually. But I was also like, you know, so desperate not to victimise so I was maybe just soaking all those references up and copying them as we do.
But they're very beautiful images, a lot of these.
Thank you.
You know, there's a real aesthetic to them, and that's not criticism, that's it.
No, it's all right if it was.
You can feel what you like, your work.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask more about that, your aesthetic choices, because you didn't really talk so much about your formal decisions. Like, seems like, for example, you've made all the images very warm. There's sort of, you've taken the blue out.
Yeah, this is coming up a lot.
I noticed that.
Yeah.
I think it was. Yeah, I know. This should maybe.
And then this thing about you've got these like
Hold on.
I don't know how you presented the contact sheet.
Aha,
where
hold
you've
on.
got all the images on.
There was something on the projector view, sorry, that's the actual tones. You should have told me.
But even then, you've not spoken so much about your formal decisions. And you know, you've got this one where you've got this almost like sequence art, where I don't know how you presented that with the series of your mother's hand cleaning the cooker. And I'm just thinking about, like, you haven't really spoken about feminism so much, and maybe that's not a big deal for you, but it really kind of reminds me, and then you've got these charts and things, really reminds me of like some of the early feminist art, like Mary Kelly, for example.
Yeah.
You know, where there's this sort of investigation of the labour of being a mother, and I feel like this is a really interesting, not a development of that, but from the inside kind of experience of, I don't know, I feel like it sits in that line, really.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, feminism really just, you know, is really important in my work, especially from an intersectional perspective. And yeah, I try, and I feel like sometimes politics can exclude sometimes when you get really heavily into discourse. And at the moment, I'm trying to let the photographs connect through this kind of simplicity almost. And not, yeah, so I guess that's why I decided to kind of cut that out at the moment. It's kind of more in my academic side of speaking and thinking. So, but yeah, feminism is super important into this aspect of my work, and I do see other feminists and writers and artists as those aunties that are guiding me through this, you know, because there's connecting to these ideas of mothering, and a lot of the time I had to be a mother in these situations as well, so I find that my guides are often feminist thinkers and artists as well, if that makes sense. Yeah. But through that kind of choice, it was often an emotional driven choice of framing, and also depending on how they wanted to be photographed as well. So it was a conversation too. I hope that answers it in a really weird all round. It was not really a question, but yeah, or an answer.
Encountered similar but different before. And that it's something I feel like you can claim in what you're doing.
Okay.
What's your viewpoint on doing this and these exhibitions and being a part of your practice? Like, what's that experience and how does she feel?
That's something I really want to do a bit of writing on, because she feels great in the sense that the Welcome Gallery were very inclusive and caring, but it was on a smaller level, a very one-to-one level. But when, like for the opening, for example, she'd never experienced that before, and it became very overwhelming for her. So there's an importance to care and tend to that. I mean, I get overwhelmed with it as well, do you know what I mean? But I think for her, like, I got this she brought me this locket recently, and on a card that she gave me with the locket, it said, "Thank you for telling our stories," And I responded, "Well, we told the story." So I think it's about that there's some work there for her to understand that she's part of it, the storytelling as well. And even in the PhD, actually, she's been employed as a co-researcher and getting paid for that. So then, but it's interesting when money gets involved, it's like, oh, actually, this is a proper thing now. It's a real thing, it's a job. So, but what's beautiful about it is that we get to experience each other in each other's work, and we learn from that. But I think at the moment, she wants to be more of the research and less seen in the images. So, and I respect that, yeah.
Anybody else?
I just think it's lovely the way we all collaborate. It's family affair, it's great.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.